Massed archery was one of the scariest problems medieval infantry faced because it didn't target one man, it targeted the whole formation. Soldiers couldn't just dodge it. They had to block it, reduce the damage, and keep moving as a unit. So what did foot troops actually do to survive when hundreds of arrows were coming in at once? Number 1. Under a sky of arrows. Massed archery in medieval warfare wasn't about one perfect shot, it was about volume and pressure. When hundreds or thousands of bows or crossbows loosed at once, the air didn't just feel dangerous, it felt busy. Constant hiss, constant thuds, constant reason to duck your head and lose your nerve. And that was the real point. Make the enemy flinch, slow down, bunch up, break formation, and start making dumb choices. A single arrow hitting one man matters, sure, but a storm of arrows changes how an entire medieval army moves. Infantry knew that if they panicked and scattered, they'd get picked apart. If they stayed tight, the odds improved fast, because arrows don't seek people the way movies suggest. Most arrows miss, hit the ground, or smack into something that isn't a vital target, especially once you add helmets, shields, and armor. The danger spikes when you're tired, climbing a slope, crossing open ground, or trudging through mud. Because you can't sprint. You can't keep your shield in the perfect place, and you can't close distance quickly. That's why archery is always tied to terrain and timing in medieval battles. It's also why commanders loved it. Arrows could force decisions without needing a risky hand-to-hand clash right away. If you've ever watched a battle medieval documentary and wondered why infantry sometimes looks stubborn or slow, a lot of that is survival math. The fastest way to die under arrows is to turn into a messy crowd. So the first defense was mental discipline. Stay in line, trust the guys next to you, and accept that the goal isn't to be untouchable, it's to be hard to break. Once you understand that, the gear and tactics start to make sense, because they're all built around one idea: keep moving as a unit while making each individual soldier a smaller, tougher target. Number 2. Layers, not miracles. People picture a medieval soldier as either fully armored like a knight from Knight's History, or basically wearing a shirt. Real life in the Middle Ages sat in the middle. Layers. The most important anti-arrow layer for a lot of infantry wasn't shiny metal, it was thick padding. A quilted jacket, often called a gambeson or acketon, was basically medieval shock absorption. It could catch or slow an arrow, and even when it didn't stop it completely, it reduced how deep it could drive and how badly it could bruise. Over that, many men wore mail. Linked iron rings forming a shirt, a hauberk, and sometimes a hood, a coif. Mail is great at stopping cuts. Against arrows, it's complicated. A sharp, narrow arrowhead at the right angle might push through, especially at closer ranges, but mail over padding is a whole different problem than mail over bare skin. Add plate pieces later on, like a breastplate, shoulder plates, or a good helmet, and suddenly the easy kills drop off hard. This is why massed archery doesn't magically delete armored combat. It punishes gaps. It punishes the face if you don't have a visor. It punishes the armpit when you lift your arm too high. It punishes the legs if you're marching with your shield up and your thighs exposed. So infantry defense wasn't get a magic armor set. It was cover as many weak spots as you can, then behave like you know where the remaining weak spots are. Helmets matter a lot here. A simple iron cap, a kettle hat, is boring but practical. It sheds downward shots and doesn't choke your vision. Later helmets like bassinets with visors made headshots harder, but you paid for it with heat and limited airflow. And shields? Shields are their own layer, not just a backup. If armor makes you harder to hurt, a shield makes you harder to hit at all. The whole system padding, mail, plates, helmet, shield, wasn't about invincibility. It was about turning rain of arrows into annoying, scary, but survivable, long enough to reach the part of the fight where infantry actually decides things. Number 3, the shield wall is a machine. A shield isn't just personal protection. In a group, it's architecture. Infantry could turn a bunch of individual shields into a moving barricade, and that's where the famous shield wall comes in. The basic idea is simple. overlap edges, close the gaps, and keep the line straight so there aren't easy angles to shoot into. But the details are what make it work under massed archery. First, you don't hold the shield perfectly flat. You angle it, because angled surfaces make arrows glance off instead of biting in. Second, you don't stand tall like you're posing. You hunch slightly, tuck your chin, and let your helmet and shield share the job. Third, you accept rotation. The front rank takes the worst of it, so commanders would cycle men forward and back when possible, especially in a drawn-out missile exchange, so nobody gets worn down to the point they can't keep their guard up. This is where a medieval army starts acting like a system rather than a pile of brave individuals. Another big tool, especially for crossbow units and some infantry screens, was the pavises, a tall shield you can plant in the ground. It's basically portable cover. People sometimes imagine pavises as a universal thing. They weren't. They show up a lot with crossbowmen and in sieges because a crossbow takes time to reload and the shooter needs a safe moment. But the logic is the same. Build a wall that doesn't get tired. In field battles, you also see smaller versions of this idea, men carrying larger shields, or units taking a minute to set up a protective line before trading missiles. The key is that shields let infantry keep cohesion. An arrow storm is terrifying, but it's a lot less terrifying when you can literally feel your shield edge locked against someone else's, like you're part of one big object. That feeling solid, connected, not alone, was a weapon in itself. It kept Middle Ages soldiers from doing the one thing archers wanted most, breaking into a scattered run. Number 4. Cheap cover wins fights. If you only think armor and shields, you miss how practical medieval soldiers were. In war in the Middle Ages, men didn't ignore free protection. They used dirt, wood, carts, fences, and whatever was lying around to create cover fast. A ditch and a small bank can do a lot, because arrows don't like obstacles that change angle and line of sight. A hedgerow can break up volleys. A shallow fold in the ground can hide half a body. If you're defending a position, you can add simple fieldworks: stakes, sharpened poles, and rough barricades. The famous English defensive setup archers protected by stakes shows how this thinking scales up. Those stakes weren't anti-arrow, they were anti-cavalry, but they helped the whole defense work, because if cavalry can't just ride down your archers, then your archers can keep firing, and the enemy infantry has to walk into that fire. Infantry on the receiving end learned the opposite lesson. If the enemy has massed archery, you want something, anything between you and the arrows while you figure out your next move. In sieges, this gets even more obvious. Mantlets, which are basically mobile wooden screens, show up as a way to let troops approach walls under missile fire. In open battles, you're less likely to see fancy wheeled screens everywhere, but you absolutely see the mindset of mantlets. Grab boards, doors, wattle hurdles, even bundles of brush to make temporary protection. And then there are wagons. Long before gunpowder warfare made wagon forts famous in some regions, wagons were still useful as barriers and anchors. A line of carts doesn't care how scary arrows are. It just sits there and blocks lines of fire. This is one of the most underappreciated parts of Dark Ages warfare and later medieval battles. Sometimes the smartest defense was embarrassingly simple. If you can fight with a ditch in front of you, you do it. If you can force archers to shoot uphill or through clutter, you do it. If you can keep your troops in partial cover while the enemy wastes arrows at bad angles, you absolutely do it. Fancy gear is great, but a muddy slope and a hedge can be better than a lord's best steel on the wrong day. Number 5. Tight formations, fewer targets. There's a reason medieval infantry loved close order formations even when they looked uncomfortable. If you're spread out, each man is a clean target. If you're packed, your shields overlap, your spear points create a fence, and you can control how the unit moves. One famous answer to archery, especially when combined with cavalry threat, was the hedgehog-style formation. Spears or pikes pointing out, shields and bodies tight, like a bristling ball or rectangle. In Scotland, you see Chiltern's dense spear formations that had mixed results depending on training and terrain. Against archery, a stationary tight formation can be dangerous if it's stuck in the open with no support, because then it becomes a kind of target zone. But when used with movement, cover, or pressure on the enemy, it becomes stubbornly hard to crack. The best formations weren't just tight, they were organized. Men knew their place. Officers or veteran fighters watched for gaps. If someone dropped or stumbled, the men next to him didn't freeze. They closed the space, because a gap isn't just a hole in the line, it's an invitation for arrows to slip into the soft parts behind the shields. This is also where polearms matter. A bill, a spear, a pike. These tools weren't only for stabbing someone in armor. They also helped keep enemy troops from rushing close, while your formation was still doing its arrow survival job. Archers love it when you chase or surge forward in a messy way. A disciplined spear line says, "Nope, you come to us on our terms." It also protects your own missile troops if you have them. A well-run medieval army often mixed roles. Some men hold the line, some shoot back, some watch the flanks. The infantry's defense against archery wasn't a single trick. It was a coordinated posture that made the whole force less fragile. When that posture held, arrows went from battle ending to just one part of the grind, which is exactly what infantry wanted. Number 6, moving under fire without falling apart. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the only real answer to massed archery is to cross the killing zone and get the fight close. But doing that wrong is a disaster. Doing it right is basically group choreography. Infantry learned to move at a pace they could maintain while still protecting themselves. If you sprint too early, you arrive exhausted, and your formation unravels. If you crawl too slowly, you soak up more volleys than you need to. So you see commanders pushing steady movement, using short bursts, or advancing in waves where the front shields take the brunt, while the rear ranks keep the unit stable. And the shields aren't just held up the whole time. People naturally imagine a permanent shield-on-face posture, but that burns you out fast and blocks your view. A smarter rhythm is, hold high when the volley is coming, drop slightly to breathe, and see when it's not, then back up again when you hear or sense the next release. That's why sound mattered. You could sometimes hear the moment an enemy line loosed, the collective snap and shout, the change in the air. Veterans paid attention to that and taught newer men what to listen for. You also try to deny clean angles. If you can advance diagonally, use a slight slope, or keep a screen of terrain on one side, you reduce how many archers can draw a clear bead on you. Even tiny choices help. Keeping helmets on, keeping shields angled, not lifting arms carelessly, not turning your body sideways and exposing ribs. And if you do have to stop, you stop with purpose. Kneeling behind shields for a short spell can reduce hits while you wait for the moment to move again. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Massed archery punishes chaos, so medieval soldiers countered it with habits. Keep spacing, keep your eyes on the standard, keep your shield edge linked, and don't let fear make your feet faster than your friends. Number 7, make the archers pay a price. A lot of people talk like archers were untouchable if they had numbers, but that's only true if you let them have a perfect day. Infantry defense also included aggression and disruption ways to make massed archery less comfortable. The most straightforward method is simple: shoot back. If your side has bows, crossbows, or later early handguns, you can contest the space. Even if you don't win the missile fight, forcing enemy archers to take cover, adjust position, or hesitate can cut their rate of fire and break the rhythm that makes volleys so dangerous. Crossbowmen behind pavises are a classic example. They create their own mini fortress and trade shots. Another method is threatening the archers directly. Archers are most effective when they're stable and protected. If skirmishers, light cavalry, or even fast infantry can get around the edge and make archers worry about a sudden rush, archers start looking over shoulders instead of focusing on clean volleys. This is why flanks matter so much in medieval battles. A line that feels safe will keep shooting. A line that feels exposed will start spacing out and stepping back, and that reduces the density of fire. Weather and ground also matter, and smart infantry used them when they could. Wet bowstrings and muddy footing don't cancel archery, but they change the equation. If the ground turns into a slog, your best answer might be to avoid the open approach and force a different fight use woods, use broken terrain. Use anything that makes it hard for archers to keep a clean formation and consistent range. And sometimes the defense is political and logistical. Pick the battlefield. If you're the side that doesn't want to be shot all day, you don't march into a flat, open killing field if you can help it. Medieval commanders weren't always free to choose, but when they could, they absolutely did. The life of a knight and the life of a foot soldier both depended on this kind of unglamorous decision-making. Not just bravery, but refusing to give the enemy their best setup. Number 8. Lessons written into famous battles. If you trace the history of war through medieval Europe, you can watch infantry learning, sometimes the hard way, what works against massed archery. At Falkirk in 1298, Scottish schiltrons stood firm, but suffered badly when English archers had room and time to shoot them up. The formation was tough against cavalry, but being pinned in the open made it a target. Over time, that same tight formation idea gets smarter when paired with terrain, movement, and better coordination, because a formation isn't automatically safe just because it's dense. It has to be able to move or be protected while it holds. At Crécy in 1346, you see how missile troops and preparation shape outcomes. English longbowmen, positioned well, helped tear apart attacks that came in disorganized waves, while Genoese crossbowmen struggled in part because their usual protective system, pavises and stable setup, didn't work smoothly under the conditions and command pressure of that day. At Agincourt in 1415, the story is often told as bows beat armor, but the more accurate version is bows plus terrain, plus defensive setup, plus exhausted attackers equals disaster. Mud slowed advances, units compressed, and arrows punished the packed movement, especially once men were forced into tight lanes where shields and spacing couldn't work the way they wanted. Through all of this, infantry defenses repeat like a theme. If you can't stop the arrows, you reduce exposure. If you can't reduce exposure, you reduce time under fire. If you can't reduce time, you reduce panic. And if you can't reduce panic, you lose the moment the line turns into a crowd. That's why, across medieval warfare, you keep seeing the same toolkit pop up in different outfits. Shields used as a team sport, padding and helmets treated as non-negotiable, cheap cover treated like treasure, formations drilled to close gaps automatically, movement paced to keep order, and constant attempts to make archers relocate or hesitate. It wasn't one secret trick. It was a practical, almost stubborn way of thinking that let ordinary Middle Ages soldiers walk forward while the sky tried to talk them out of it.